Audio Jungle.
Hello and welcome to today's edition of Mexico News Network's Breaking News. We're broadcasting from the beautiful Riviera Maya in El Dorado Royal Spa Resort by Charisma. Now stay with us because we have excellent news and information coming right ahead for you guys. But before we start, remember that Mexico News Network is your #1 source of positive and relevant information about Mexico, the world of science, technology, and so forth. Ergo, follow us on social networks on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, and don't forget to browse through our website for more information, www.mexiconewsnetwork.com. Now let's begin with today's main headline stories. Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto and his accompanying delegates signed over 60 binational agreements with France. The president said in a joint announcement made at the Élysée Palace in Paris that they want there to be even more growth among these nations. They've heard an extensive report of what was not there before and what is there today, in many different areas, of course. Of that which did not exist 2 years ago and how that has shed light and has acted as a beacon for the enrichment of the relationship between Mexico and France. The agreements, which range from educational to scientific and commercial exchange, were signed in the context of the Mexican government's state visit to France. The visit was scheduled so that the president and his team would be present in Paris for Bastille Day, France's most important civic holiday. Now, this is President Peña Nieto's first state visit to France during his official status as Mexico's chief of state. As the victor in Mexico's 2012 elections, his last visit took place that same year when he was president-elect. The result of that visit was the creation of the Strategic French-Mexican Council, which is currently made up of major players in both countries' political, economic, and cultural spheres. French President François Hollande stated on Thursday that they sought not so much to erase, but to open up a new phase in the friendship held between Mexico and France, and that they have demonstrated that when there is will, when there is ambition and a joint vision, it's possible to advance swiftly. One of the most notable agreements signed was that between the National Autonomous University of Mexico, the UNAM, and the French Institute of Research for the Development for the creation of a telescope at the observatory located on the UNAM's campus in Mexico City. Likewise, the director of Mexico's National Council on Science and Technology signed a total of 23 agreements to create programs dedicated to educational and scientific exchange knowledge between these two nations. The general director of Mexico's National Exterior Commerce Bank, Enrique de la Madrid, signed an agreement with French capital firm Promecap and the French aeronautical parts distributor Paris Saint-Denis Aero SA. According to the Memorandum of Understanding, the latter would commit to setting up an industrial base in Mexico. Bancomext has also agreed to open a line of revolving credit for the sum of $100 million. This is with French financial multinational Société Générale in order to support Mexican exports. Both heads of state reaffirmed their great commitment to address insecurity. For its part, France will be assisting with the training of Mexico's newly minted National Gendarmerie, which is at least partially modeled after France's National Police Force. Notably, during this visit, members of the Mexican Armed Forces participated in this year's Bastille Day parade, which took place in the heart of Paris. And in other news, in order to assure the best results in commercial, academic, and touristic bilateral trade between Mexico and the UK, the 7th annual round of high-level economic talks took place with representatives of both nations. Delegates of Mexico and the United Kingdom, headed by the Executive Director of Mexican Agency of International Cooperation for Development, Mr. Juan Manuel Valle, and Kate Smith, Director for the Americas at the FCO, analyzed the commitment of the goals in the referred subjects and new forms of cooperation. before representatives of the Mexican Ministry of Finance, Economy, Energy, ProMéxico, and the Mexican Tourism Board, the director of AMEXID chaired a session in which was explored the potential modernization of the European-Mexico Global Treatment enacted in the year 2000, as well as the competitive advantages of the transatlantic trade and investment partnership. Now, including the participation of the ambassadors of Mexico in the UK, Diego Gómez Pickering, and his British counterpart, Duncan Taylor, the group of experts discussed the progress in academic, scientific, and technological cooperation, in which bilateral projects of innovation were also included, as well as scholarship programs for Mexican students based in the Newton Fund. It was immensely agreed to follow by the measures taken by ProMéxico, the institution of the Mexican government to boost trade and investment from abroad, and the UK trade and investment in order to reach the goal of duplicating bilateral trade from $3.5 to $7 billion by the year 2015. Officially designated as the Year of Mexico in the UK and the Year of the UK in Mexico. Now, during these two-day sessions were identified specific cooperation opportunities in transparency and anti-corruption, as well as well-known values shared by both countries. Now, the 7th edition of the high-level economic talks took place in a context of a flourishing bilateral relation between Mexico and the UK. In this framework, as an example of this, was recalled the state visit that the President of Mexico, Enrique Peña Nieto, conducted back in March, attending the invitation of Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. Coming up next, by the year 2050, the global economic outlook could be very different from today's. According to the latest special report published by the Economist Intelligence Unit titled Long-Term Macroeconomic Forecasts, Key Trends to 2050, Mexico, China, as well as India will be placed among the top 10 economic powers of the world, possibly overtaking Russia as well as Italy. Now, the document specifies that in the next 3 decades, the United States could lose its status as the first world economic power in favor of China, a scenario that analysts as well as economic experts have debated in recent years. Now, the British firm's forecast is that in this period of time, the gross domestic product of the Chinese economy will grow tenfold, reaching almost $106,000 billion from its current $103,000 billion. Mexico, on the other hand, could reach 8th place on the listing of the world's highest-ranking economies, overtaking Russia, Britain, and France. Should it fulfill this prediction, Mexico would stand as the very first Spanish-speaking economy to make the list. The report predicts that Mexico's gross domestic product will grow from its current $1.29 billion to $9.83 billion by 2050. Now, some experts have speculated that these changes may lead to the modification of memberships in the G7. Now, by 2050, it is possible that only 3 of the 7 current member nations would remain in the select group, including the United States, Germany, and Japan. The report also adds that in the medium term, this will require the world's existing powers, notably the US, to let India and especially China play a greater role on the world stage and also adapt international institutions to allow them to exert greater influence. Now, in more information, Mexico's tax reform came into effect, including an 8% tax on high-calorie foods and a 10% tax on sugar-sweetened beverages, better known as sodas, juice, and other sugary beverages. It was all implemented as part of an effort to discourage the consumption, to battle obesity and diabetes, seeing how the country has one of the highest rates of these conditions in the entire world. The result has been a small yet very positive output, as sugary beverages scales and their sales dropped by 12% by December 2014. Now, when comparing numbers of people suffering from overweight, obesity, and diabetes, Mexico and the United States are in fact quite similar. For that matter, these actions have actually served as a benchmark of what can be achieved in the US by establishing a very similar model. Berkeley, California is the first American city to pass a soda tax law of 1 cent per ounce of sugar-sweetened beverages after seeing the wonderful results it had in Mexico. Notably, 30 other cities in the US tried to implement this measure before and sadly failed. The difference here is that Berkeley set a 20% tax as opposed to Mexico's 10%. Indeed, 10% is believed by some to be insufficient, which is why Alejandro Calvillo, the director of the Mexico City-based advocacy group Consumer Power, is trying to get that number up to 20%. It should be noted that Mexico, unlike the US, established this law for the entire country, which has actually led to a great decrease in soda consumption as well as an increase in the consumption of water of up to 4%, according to a study by Xu Wenying, a health economist at the University of North Carolina, who was quoted in Wired magazine. Now, a problem with this is that not every Mexican city has access to clean drinking water and sometimes not even potable water. Yet most do have very easy access to soda, sadly. Now, according to Claire Wang, an epidemiologist of Columbia University, also quoted in Wire, this could be resolved if the Mexican government earmarks earnings from the soda tax to install public water fountains. It is a rather large if because it's not entirely clear as to where the earnings are currently going. So, what is next? After the soda tax has been proven efficient, Calvillo hopes to double the tax percentage for sugar-sweetened beverages and therefore eliminate completely taxes for bottled water. I don't think it can get better than that. We'll be right back after these few commercial breaks. Stay with us for more information.
Audio Jungle.